We squeeze its heart, we'll make it harder for ISIL to pump its terror and propaganda to the rest of the world. So many people are migrating, said one Syrian refugee. ISIL, she said, will end up all alone.
I'd like to take a step back to consider the serious challenges that we're facing and to remember the millions of people that we're protecting. On the national security front, we confront individuals who want to harm the United States in whatever way they can. Terrorists hell-bent on striking us with IEDs, vehicles, guns, and knives. For example, as we speak, the Bureau has about 1,000 active ISIS investigations in all 50 states. Cyber criminals who are using sophisticated means to infiltrate our systems and steal every piece of data that they can get their hands on. These threats are real, they are many, and they are a grave threat to all Americans.
From a U.S. military advisor, mind you, this is coming from the head of ISIS, this chilling message. So in this audio recording, he taunts the U.S.-led coalition, calling them, quote, terrified, weak, and powerless.
Well, I didn't think you had it in you.
I'm your huckleberry.
You look like somebody just walked over your grave.
I think ISIL does want to eventually find its mark here.
You're expecting an attack in the United States?
I'm expecting them to try. I believe that their attempts are inevitable. I don't think their successes necessarily are.
Chuck Hagel just a couple of days ago that said ISIS was like no threat we've ever seen. There has been concern about a homeland threat. ISIS leadership will hear this statement that the U.S. right now has no strategy to deal with them. No strategy? A little odd.
He said we don't have a strategy, but at the same time, that's highly unorthodox for a president to confess. I don't have a plan. I don't have a strategy. Don't know where we're going from here. I mean, like, whoa. That caused a lot of people to say, well, that's what we've been worried about all along. You're using force and you don't know what you're doing with it.
Manafort under surveillance. CNN has learned that investigators wiretapped former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort under secret court order, both before and after the 2016 election. And that surveillance continued into this year, including a period when Manafort wasn't working for the campaign, but was known to talk with President Donald Trump.
When it comes to telephone calls, nobody is listening to your telephone calls. They are not looking at people's names, and they're not looking at content. Nobody's listening to the content of people's phone calls. This program, by the way, is fully overseen not just by Congress, but by the FISA court, a court specially put together to evaluate classified programs to make sure that the executive branch or government generally is not abusing them and that it's being carried out consistent with.
Folks taking credit for this economic miracle. So when you hear all this talk about economic miracles right now, remember who started it, and that's what I handed off to the next guy. A week from Monday, the government will shut down. Congress must vote to pay America's bills. This is usually done with a simple, routine vote to raise what's called the debt ceiling. This is just a routine thing that you got to do so that Treasury can pay the bills. The debt ceiling is not a question of authorizing more spending. We might not be able to pay our troops.
He realizes now raising the debt ceiling is so important to the health of this economy and the global economy.
The only bottom line that I have is that we have to extend this debt ceiling through the next election. Don't be bamboozled. As promised, the rest of our troops in Iraq will come home by the end of the year. I pledged to bring the war in Iraq to a responsible end, and that is exactly what we are doing, as promised and on schedule. As promised, the rest of our troops in Iraq will come home by the end of the year.
The Iraqi Army's most senior general has warned that Iraqi troops won't be ready to take over responsibility from American forces until 2020.
And the enemy only responds to force, and we now have that force. Surge forces go away, that capability goes away. And the Iraqi security forces aren't ready yet to do that. So now what you're going to find, if you did that, and the violence would escalate. it'd be a mess. It's going to take some time to mature the situation. Over time, we can turn the area over to Iraqi security forces. That's not going to happen anytime soon.
Later, in the void.
Thousands of people are being butchered, burning bodies in the streets, executions, beheadings. This is a disaster. It was predicted by me.
For nearly 9 years, America's war in Iraq will be over.
On the White House website, the headline reads, President Obama has ended the war in Iraq. President Obama promised to end U.S. troop involvement in Iraq, and today he fulfilled that promise.
All U.S. troops will leave by the end of next year. The last American soldier will cross the border out of Iraq.
But keeping him honest, it leaves out a key fact. Until the moment Mr. Obama made his announcement, American negotiators were trying to hammer out a deal to keep a substantial troop presence in Iraq. But in his announcement today, President Obama made no mention of that.
Well, the president indicated, and his administration indicated, forces agreement that would keep troops in place. Either failed to do it by virtue of ineptitude, or they decided that it wasn't that important. I believe that you listen to the commanders on the ground, what the timetable is to transition entirely to the Iraqi military by virtue of putting in place a status of forces agreement.
When I agreed, I believe that there should have been a status of forces agreement.
That would tie us down. That certainly would not help us in the Middle East.
Petraeus came, but no one saw him, with the hope of clearing up confusion about intelligence in the days after September's deadly attack. Petraeus concluded it was an act of terror.
And there was clear terrorist involvement.
He said that straight up.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the most politically charged controversy is over UN Ambassador Susan Rice's comments 5 days after the attack. Why she pointed to Benghazi demonstrations, which officials now say didn't even happen. Why Rice did not talk about terrorist forces.
She was covering up the cause of the Benghazi attack less than 2 months from President Obama's re-election.
I would bomb the out of him.
No previous president has inherited such chaos in the Middle East. A rampant ISIS spawning terror worldwide.
A greeting of peace from Muslim communities in my country. Assalamu alaikum.
8 years later, Obama is widely viewed as squandering America's standing by drawing down on troops in Iraq too fast, failing to enforce red lines in Syria, letting President Putin build regional influence. Smashing ISIS alone won't reclaim its ground lost to Russia, may even help Shia Muslim Iran's growing regional ambitions. They dominate in Iraq, threaten the same in Syria. That's not sitting well with America's Sunni allies and support the US fight against ISIS and hate Iran.
Every pathway to a nuclear weapon is cut off. It would have taken Iran 2 to 3 months to break out with enough material to rush to a bomb. We've now extended that breakout time to a year. Is it possible that Iran decides to try to cheat? If it does, first of all, we've built in a 1-year breakout time, which gives us a year to respond forcefully.
It is one of the great dumb deals of our time.
Consider what happens in a world without this deal.
Is money that's gone to terrorism. The president is saying the money that President Obama turned over to the Iran government.
But think of it this way. We know the regime is corrupt. We know the regime is dangerous. Imagine what it would be if it had nuclear weapons right now.
An organization like ISIL owns such extraordinary brutality, complete disregard for innocent lives. So when I said that we are containing their spread in Iraq and Syria, in fact, they control less territory than they did last year.
ISIS's capabilities seem to be expanding.
As I said before, they can kill a lot of people, and preventing them from doing so is challenging. If there was a swift and quick solution to this, I assure you that not just the United States, who have been subject to these terrorist attacks, would have implemented those strategies.
One eternity later.
Donald Trump likes to take credit for the defeat of ISIS during his first year in office.
When President Trump inherited this war a year ago, which then resulted in a more aggressive strategy.
The U.S. and Iraqi governments declared victory against ISIS.
Give you any pause to see this deal praised by Syrian dictator Assad as a great victory for Iran, and yet our closest ally in the Middle East calls it a mistake of historic proportions?
Let me answer the question that you asked. It does not give me pause. Assad or others in Tehran may be trying to spin the deal. I do expect the debate to be based on facts and not speculation. There are legitimate, real concerns here. What is your preferred alternative? Some alternative to present. And I haven't heard that.
Well, they too bear a responsibility, and that is to tell people what the better alternative is.
You said under no circumstances should we relieve pressure.
Yes, and I used the phrase as long as possible.
That tells you that somebody's not paying attention.
We didn't have a scandal embarrassed us. There wasn't anything venal during 8 years, and that's because
He spoke for 5 minutes about the death of James Foley.
all of us feel the ache of his absence.
And immediately afterwards spent 4 hours on the golf course. Images of the president smiling while Foley's family grieved.
You're on vacation golfing while one of your fellow Americans is being tormented in another country. I find that very inappropriate, sir.
And Attorney General Holder promising justice for. While they spoke, the president was again playing golf.
This picture really shows a president who is disengaged.
I think there are probably 1 or 2 terrorists in ISIS, because this is how they make their money, right? They are negotiating with Spock, with a pitching wedge here. He's Spock. And I'm sure there may even be 1 or 2, like, terrorists, Willie, over in Syria right now, looking at him going, wow, that's one cold bastard.